The year was 1943. Europe was burning. From the frozen steppes of the east to the shattered towns of the west, the world had become a vast battlefield. Every sunrise brought the echo of artillery, and every sunset fell upon men who would never rise again. In a small border village, far from the command posts and strategy maps, the war arrived not with tanks, but with whispers. Whispers of soldiers retreating. Whispers of an army that was running out of men. And then, one morning, the distant thunder of gunfire rolled across the hills, closer than ever before. Snipers had become the most feared ghosts of the front. They ruled the silence between battles. One shot, one life, unseen, unknown. Every platoon feared them. Every soldier watched the tree-line, waiting for the glint of a scope that meant death. Among those who stayed behind was Anton Kovalenko, a quiet factory mechanic. He was not a soldier. He had never held a rifle longer than a hunting gun, never saluted an officer. His hands were meant for repairing machines, not taking lives. But in the spring of 1943, even mechanics had no choice. The front was moving faster than the orders. Civilians were being armed, trained in minutes, and sent to hold positions soldiers had already abandoned. When the first enemy patrols entered the valley, Anton was among a group of volunteers guarding a broken rail bridge. They had no uniforms, just patched coats, borrowed rifles, and hope. That morning, mist hung low over the fields, the kind of silence that precedes either peace or slaughter. The first sniper attack came without warning. A young guard beside Anton dropped instantly, his helmet clattering down the stones. The others scattered for cover, shouting, confused. No one knew where the shot came from. The forest stared back, motionless. Then another crack. Another man fell. Anton pressed his face into the dirt, heart pounding. He had seen death before, but never like this, cold, invisible, mathematical. Around him, men were frozen in fear. The officer was gone. Command? None. Orders? Silence. In that silence, Anton's mechanic's mind began to work. He studied the angles, the echo of the shots, the position of the fallen men. He noticed the reflection from a distant ridge, just for a second. A shimmer of glass. That's where it was coming from. He took a breath, aimed with the old rifle someone had thrown at him hours before. The scope was cloudy, useless. He squinted through the iron sights, found the ridge, and waited. Minutes passed. A crow landed on a tree near the spot. Then another glint. Anton fired. The echo rolled across the valley like thunder. And then, nothing. No reply. No second shot. When the soldiers crawled forward later, they found the enemy sniper, stone still, a single hole through his eye. It was Anton's bullet. That day, the men began to whisper about him. The mechanic who saw what no one else could. They called it luck. Anton called it survival. But that was only the beginning. The war had just opened its gates, and it would not close them for years to come. And for Anton, the man who was never meant to fight, this was the first step toward becoming something he never imagined. A legend born not from duty, but from desperation. The war had begun, and so had his story. Anton Kovalenko was never meant to wear a uniform. Before the war, his world was made of iron and grease, not gunpowder and blood. He worked in a small repair shed on the edge of Poltava, fixing broken tractors and farm tools, his hands blackened by oil, his ears filled with the hum of machines instead of the thunder of artillery. He had a wife, a son barely 10, and a quiet dream to open his own workshop someday. But when the front line shifted east, dreams were the first casualties. Factories shut down, trains stopped running, and the air grew heavy with the rumor of defeat. The army was retreating. The wounded poured through the streets, and the word volunteer began to mean Whoever is still breathing. Anton did not want to fight. But war does not ask what a man wants. It only asks what he is capable of. When soldiers came to the village, they carried lists of names. Every able-bodied man was to report for civil defense. Anton's name was on it. He tried to explain that he was an engineer, not a fighter. The officer looked at his hands, scarred and strong, and said quietly, "Then build something that kills the enemy." So he did. At first, Anton repaired rifles, polished optics, and mended gun mounts for others. But the army's supplies were running dry, and the precision scopes once made in the city were gone. Snipers at the front began to fight with cracked glass and rusted metal. Anton, out of habit more than hope, began experimenting with what he had: broken binoculars, camera lenses, bits of copper wire. One night, under the dim glow of a lantern, he adjusted 2 pieces of glass until the blurred lines of a tree outside his window snapped into focus. It wasn't perfect, the edges wobbled, the center sharp, but it worked. A homemade scope. When he showed it to the soldiers, they laughed. "A toy," one of them said, but Anton didn't mind. He wasn't trying to prove anything. He just wanted to help and to survive. Days turned into weeks. The enemy pushed closer, and the bridge defense he joined became a graveyard of courage. After that first kill, the impossible shot that silenced a sniper, the commanders began to notice him. The same officer who had once mocked his toy scope now asked him to stay. Anton refused at first. He had no uniform, no training, and no desire for medals. "I fix machines," he said, "not men." But the officer's reply was simple. "You see what others can't. That's a gift. And right now, we can't afford to waste gifts." So Anton stayed. He learned quickly. He studied the rhythm of gunfire, the shimmer of heat on metal, the strange stillness before a sniper fires. He began to understand that sniping wasn't just about shooting. It was about patience, geometry, and nerve. It was about knowing people, not just targets. Sometimes he sat for hours without firing a single shot, simply watching the horizon through his crude scope, adjusting his aim, reading the wind. Other soldiers joked that he was mad, until they realized that wherever Anton was watching, death followed soon after. Still, he never called himself a sniper. He hated the word. In his mind, he wasn't killing men. He was removing the danger that would kill his friends. Each shot was another day his comrades could go home alive. By autumn, word of the civilian marksman began to spread across the sector. Officers wanted to meet him, study his weapon, understand his mind. But Anton avoided attention. When asked for his name, he would simply answer, "Just the mechanic." Behind the quiet voice and calm eyes was a man who had already lost everything that made him ordinary, yet refused to lose his humanity. He didn't fight for glory. He fought because someone had to. The army records would never list him. The medals would never reach his hands. But on the battlefield, every man who fought beside him knew one thing. Anton Kovalenko was not a soldier. And that was exactly why he became a legend. The front was starving for weapons. By 1943, the Soviet supply lines had stretched thin. Factories were gone, railways shattered, and what little remained was being sent to the main divisions. In the smaller defense units, like the one guarding the Poltava sector, men were fighting with whatever they could hold. Rusted rifles, cracked barrels, and scopes that fogged with every breath. For Anton Kovalenko, a man of machines, that was unbearable. He had spent years tuning the delicate gears of tractors and reshaping metal with precision. To him, every bolt had a rhythm, every lens a secret language of light. So when he saw the soldiers fumbling with useless weapons, something inside him stirred. Not anger, but a mechanic's frustration. In the evenings, after the skirmishes died down, Anton would sit by the dim firelight, surrounded by broken equipment. Bent scopes, shattered binoculars, even the lens from an old camera scavenged from an abandoned house. He spread them out on an army blanket like puzzle pieces, muttering to himself, testing angles, tracing the path of light through glass. One soldier laughed and said, "You can't build a rifle out of junk." Anton only smiled. "You build what you need," he said, "or you die waiting for someone else to send it." Days passed. The men around him began to ignore the tinkering sounds coming from Anton's corner. They thought he was wasting time, a civilian playing soldier. But Anton's mind was working faster than his hands. He measured the curvature of a binocular lens with a piece of string. He carved tiny spacers from the handle of a broken shovel. Every detail mattered. By the fourth night, his creation began to take shape. A crude, improvised sniper scope, patched together from glass and brass, its focus ring made from the thread of a tin can lid. The adjustments were stiff, the field of vision narrow, but when he peered through it for the first time, the world on the other side snapped into a clarity he hadn't seen in months. Through the mist and the moonlight, he could see the ridges of distant trees, sharp and alive. It worked. The next morning, he fastened it to an old Mosin Nagant rifle using wire and melted solder. When the officers saw it, they burst into laughter. "What do you call this thing?" one asked. Anton answered calmly, "A chance." Later that day, as the enemy patrols approached, he took his position near the bridge. He lay flat, breathing slow, his cheek pressed against the cold stock of the rifle. The others watched from behind the sandbags, whispering bets about whether his strange invention would even fire straight. The air was still. Through the scope, Anton spotted movement, a helmet glinting near the treeline, then a rifle barrel. A sniper scanning for targets. Anton adjusted his focus. The image blurred, then cleared. He fired. The recoil stung his shoulder, but the result was undeniable. The glint vanished. Seconds later, the enemy patrol froze, shouting. Then silence. The men around Anton stared at him, speechless. One finally muttered, "Impossible." Anton lifted his rifle and checked the glass. The lens had cracked slightly from the force, but it still worked. He smiled faintly. "It doesn't have to be perfect," he said, "only precise enough." From that day, the laughter stopped. Soldiers began to line up, asking him to fix their weapons. Even the officers came, pretending to inspect his work while secretly admiring it. Word spread along the trenches about the mechanic who could make a rifle shoot straighter than the factory's own gunsmiths. But Anton wasn't proud. He knew what his creation really meant. Every improvement in his design, every sharper lens would take another life. That night, as he cleaned his rifle under the flicker of a lantern, he whispered to himself, "This isn't invention. It's survival wearing a different face." And yet, deep down, he knew the truth. War had changed him. The man who once built tools to grow food was now building tools to take life. In the distance, thunder rolled, or maybe it was artillery. Anton closed his eyes, resting his hands on the rifle that no one believed could work. Tomorrow, it would speak again. The morning came gray and silent. Mist clung to the fields like a curtain, muffling every sound except the faint crackle of frost beneath worn boots. The men guarding the bridge hadn't slept. The night had been filled with distant gunfire and the low hum of engines crawling closer. Anton Kovalenko checked his rifle for the 100th time. His hands trembled, though not from cold. The homemade scope glinted faintly in the pale light. Around him, soldiers whispered nervously, exchanging glances toward the treeline where death seemed to wait, invisible and patient. Somewhere out there, an enemy sniper was watching. The commander, a stern man named Captain Malin, crouched beside Anton. You say you can spot him? Anton nodded slowly. He's on that ridge near the birch line. He fired twice yesterday. The captain frowned. You sure? Anton didn't answer. He simply lifted the rifle and peered through the glass. Through his shaky, improvised scope, the world sharpened. He could see the dew on leaves, the faint shimmer of heat on metal. The rifle's alignment wasn't perfect, but his instincts filled the gaps. Years of mechanical precision told him what his eyes alone could not. A breeze stirred the grass. A shadow moved. Anton's heart began to race. There, between two trees, a brief flash, like sunlight on water, a scope reflection. He exhaled slowly, the way he had seen hunters do in the forests of his childhood. Time seemed to slow. His finger found the trigger. Then the sound, not of a shot, but of silence breaking. Anton fired. The recoil drove into his shoulder, but he didn't blink. Through the scope, he saw the shadow jerk back, the light vanish. The rifle fell from the ridge like a dead bird tumbling through branches. The echo rolled across the valley. Then nothing. No return fire. No movement. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a voice whispered, "Did he?" Anton didn't answer. He was still staring through the scope, his breath fogging the glass. The captain sent 2 scouts to check. They crawled through the mud, disappearing into the mist. Minutes felt like hours. When they returned, one held up a helmet, clean, round, and pierced clean through the center. Perfect shot. The soldiers erupted in disbelief. Some clapped his shoulder. Others crossed themselves. The captain only stared, his face caught between awe and unease. "You've done what trained men couldn't," he muttered. But Anton felt no pride, only a cold weight in his chest. He had built this weapon with his own hands, shaped the glass, adjusted the lens, crafted each part with care. Now that creation had taken a life. He sat down beside the sandbags, staring at the distant ridge. The wind carried the faint smell of smoke and iron. His hands, still warm from the rifle's recoil, felt foreign, as if they belonged to someone else. That night, while others celebrated, Anton stayed alone by the fire, cleaning the rifle again and again. The crack in the lens had spread slightly, like a scar. He ran a finger over it and whispered to himself, "It worked too well." The next morning, orders came from headquarters. Hold position. Expect counter-sniper fire. Anton knew what that meant. Killing a sniper was never the end. It was an invitation. Someone on the other side would come looking for revenge. Still, he didn't run. He stayed with his unit, repairing weapons, strengthening the scope, calculating distances in his head like equations. The men began calling him the engineer. Some even believed his rifle was blessed. But Anton knew better. There was nothing holy about what he had done. His first shot had found its mark. His first kill was perfect. And from that moment, the line between mechanic and soldier began to blur. One silent bullet at a time. The shot that silenced the ridge should have changed everything. But in war, truth is often buried beneath disbelief. When the scouts returned with the enemy sniper's rifle, Captain Mallon filed the report, but the higher officers laughed. "A civilian with a homemade scope?" they said. "A lucky guess, nothing more." Luck, that was the word everyone used. Luck had pulled the trigger, luck had killed the sniper, and luck, they claimed, would run out soon enough. Anton Kovalenko said nothing. He had no rank to defend, no badge to polish. He wasn't one of them, not really. He still wore his worn work jacket beneath the soldier's coat. And instead of medals, the pockets carried screws, rags, and a tiny screwdriver. For the next few days, the unit remained in the valley. The weather turned colder. Snow began to fall, covering everything in a ghostly silence. The men stayed low, scanning the ridges. Sniper fire had stopped, but fear lingered like fog. Anton kept working on his scope. He melted candle wax to seal the cracks in the lens, filed the edge of the mount smoother. Every movement was slow, careful. His rifle had become a machine again, one he trusted more than people. Then, 3 nights later, a courier arrived from headquarters. He brought a letter. Anton was ordered to report to the regional command post for verification. He was escorted there by 2 soldiers who said little. When he arrived, the officers in charge didn't greet him like a hero. They treated him like a suspect. A long wooden table, cold tea, maps scattered with pins. A colonel leaned back in his chair and said, "You claim to have eliminated a German marksman, a trained sniper. Using what? Binocular glass." Anton shook his head. "I don't claim anything. I just did what I could." The colonel smirked. "Then prove it." They brought out 3 rifles, placed them on sandbags in the snow. At the far end of the range, barely visible through the storm, 3 tin helmets were nailed to wooden posts. The colonel gave the order. "You have 3 shots. Let's see if you're still lucky." Anton took his rifle, the patched-up one with the crooked scope. He lay down, breathing slow, ignoring the murmurs of the men behind him. The cold bit through his gloves, but his hands were steady. He adjusted the focus. The lens fogged, then cleared. He aimed. First shot, the left helmet spun off its post. Second shot. A spark of metal and snow exploded from the middle one. The officers went silent. Anton took a long pause before the third. The wind shifted, stronger now. He adjusted 1 notch, calculated distance in his head the way he once measured engine pressure. The third shot cracked the silence. When the smoke cleared, the final helmet was gone, shattered clean through the center. No one spoke for several seconds. Then the colonel exhaled sharply, as if the cold had just reached him for the first time. "You're either a miracle or a liar," he muttered. Anton simply lowered his rifle and said, "Neither, just a man who refuses to miss." Word of the test spread faster than gunfire. The soldiers who had once called him lucky now watched him differently, half with respect, half with fear. Some whispered that he had the devil's eyes. Others said he could see through walls. But Anton didn't want fame. He wanted sleep, peace, silence, the kind that never existed anymore. When he returned to his post, Captain Malin greeted him with a faint smile. "Congratulations," he said. Anton shrugged. "For what? They still don't believe." The captain nodded. "No, but they'll remember." That night, Anton sat alone near the dying campfire. The snow fell thicker, the world shrinking to a soft white blur. He looked at his rifle resting across his knees and whispered, "It's not belief that keeps me alive. It's precision." From somewhere beyond the forest, a single gunshot echoed, distant, lonely, perhaps an answer from the other side. Anton didn't flinch. He just looked toward the darkness, eyes steady behind the cracked glass of his scope, and whispered to himself, "They'll believe soon enough." The forest had fallen silent again. Too silent. By winter's edge of 1943, both sides had learned to respect the quiet, because quiet meant a sniper was waiting. Anton Kovalenko now held an unofficial title among the ranks, the Ghost Mechanic. He never boasted about his kills, never smiled when men congratulated him. He simply adjusted his scope, cleaned his barrel, and vanished into the frost. But this time, he wasn't the only ghost. Rumors began to circulate through the trenches. Whispers of a German marksman known only as Vogel, the Hawk. He was said to pick off men from half a kilometer away, without missing. His shots were clean, patient, surgical. He left no trace except the silence that followed. Anton heard the stories but paid them little mind. He had his section to protect, a dozen men stationed in a ruined farmhouse overlooking a frozen river. The walls were cracked, the windows blown out, the roof half gone. Each day was the same: watch, wait, survive. Then came the morning of February 2nd. Private Yeroshenko stepped outside to fetch firewood. He didn't even make it 5 steps. One single shot, straight through the heart. No sound of a plane, no warning, no second attempt. The men froze. Anton crouched beside the fallen soldier, studied the angle, the wound. "High ground," he murmured. "South Ridge. About 400 meters." They waited all day. No movement, no flash, nothing. Whoever had fired that shot was watching, patient, invisible. That night, Anton sat by candlelight, sketching maps in the dirt. He traced lines, measured angles, replayed the echo in his head. He had done this before with broken engines, finding the flaw by listening to the sound it made when it failed. The hawk was methodical, so Anton would be too. The next morning, before dawn, he crawled from the farmhouse, dragging himself across the frozen field inch by inch. The snow was hard, biting through his uniform, but it kept him hidden. He carried no rations, only his rifle, wrapped in cloth to muffle the metal's shine. By midday, he reached a collapsed barn near the treeline, the perfect cover. From there, he could see the ridge through a narrow gap. The sun was low, blinding anyone who looked west. He used it. Hours passed. Nothing. The kind of stillness that drives weaker men mad. Anton didn't move, didn't blink for too long. His breath froze in small clouds against the wood. Then a flicker, just a shadow between 2 trees. Not movement, but absence of it. He focused, adjusted, waited. The wind shifted slightly, brushing the snow off a branch. And there it was, the faint, round glint of glass. He exhaled. He didn't shoot yet. That's what Vogel wanted, for his prey to reveal themselves first. So Anton waited longer. 30 minutes. An hour. The sun sank behind the hills. Finally, a crow landed on the ridge, and in that instant, a spark of light flashed again. Anton fired. The rifle bucked against his shoulder. A heartbeat later, a shot echoed back, but it went wide. Both men had fired almost simultaneously. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Anton heard it, the faint sound of metal sliding. Vogel was reloading. Anton rolled to the side, shifted his position just a meter, pressed his cheek to the stock, and aimed again. He didn't look for movement now, he looked for geometry. The shape of the ridge, the path of light, the distance between trees. He found it. A small mound where the snow had melted slightly, maybe from a man's breath. That was it. He fired again. The echo bounced off the trees. And this time there was no reply. For a long while, Anton stayed still, watching, waiting for a sign of life. None came. When darkness fell, he crawled back to the farmhouse. His fingers were stiff, his legs numb, but his eyes were sharp as ever. At dawn, a scouting unit confirmed it. A German sniper, face down in the snow, one clean shot through the scope. The glass shattered like an eye staring into eternity. The men cheered when they heard. Someone slapped Anton on the back, called him a hero. He only said quietly, he was good, too good to die unseen. Later, as the sun rose over the frost-covered ridge, Anton looked through his own cracked scope and whispered, "There's always another one watching." He was right. In war, every victory becomes someone else's target. And for the first time, Anton understood it wasn't about who shot first. It was about who could stay unseen the longest. The duel was over, but the hunt had just begun. After the duel on the ridge, nothing was ever the same again. Word traveled faster than gunfire in those frozen valleys. And soon every soldier within 50 kilometers had heard the same story, a mechanic who killed the hawk. No one knew his name at first. They called him the Ghost. Some said he appeared from nowhere, fired one shot, and vanished before the echo faded. Others swore he could see through fog, through snow, even through walls. Men exaggerated, as soldiers always do, but the fear was real. For Anton Kovalenko, that fear was a curse. He never asked for fame, never wanted to be a symbol. Yet now, even his comrades looked at him differently. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered blessings when he passed, as if superstition could protect them. The German side had their own stories. Captured radio intercepts mentioned an unidentified marksman, responsible for several officer deaths in the sector. Sniper teams were ordered to hunt him down. Posters appeared in enemy trenches. Find the Ghost. Eliminate him. But no one could. Anton had become what war turned men into when they survived too long. A myth stitched from fear and accuracy. He moved differently now. Slower. Quieter. He had learned that killing was not the hardest part. Surviving your own legend was. By March 1944, Anton's unit was stationed in the outskirts of Kovel, a city swallowed by ruins and smoke. The ground was frozen mud, littered with shell fragments and abandoned helmets. Every window was a potential death trap. Every shadow could hide a rifle. Anton built his nest inside a collapsed bell tower. From there, he could see half the city, and anyone foolish enough to move during daylight. He worked alone, slept 2 hours at a time, and kept his rifle wrapped in cloth to muffle the sound when adjusting it. The men below him began to use his presence as reassurance. If the Ghost is watching, they said, we're safe. Anton hated that phrase. No one was ever safe. One morning, the fog rolled in thick and heavy, hiding everything beyond 20 meters. The perfect hunting ground. Through his scope, Anton watched German scouts move cautiously among the ruins. He waited, counting steps, listening to his heartbeat match the rhythm of the war around him. He fired once. A soldier fell silently. The others dropped flat, shouting orders Anton couldn't hear. But he knew what would happen next. They would retreat, crawl back into their lines, and whisper to everyone they met that the Ghost was out there again. And so the reputation grew stronger, heavier, like a shadow that no longer belonged to him. By April, even the commanding officers began to rely on his name more than his presence. Send the Ghost, they said, as if summoning a weapon, not a man. They gave him no orders, only coordinates. They didn't ask how he did it, only that he continued. At night, Anton wrote small notes in a torn notebook, a mechanic's handwriting, clean and careful. Every shot has a cost. Every legend ends in silence. He wasn't writing for others. He was writing to remember he was still human. Then, one day, a young soldier climbed up the bell tower to bring him tea. The boy couldn't have been more than 17. His hands trembled as he handed over the cup. "Sir," he whispered, "is it true that you never miss?" Anton looked at him, tired eyes behind cracked glass. He smiled faintly and said, "Everyone misses. Some just don't live long enough to admit it." The boy nodded, unsure how to reply, then left, and Anton went back to watching the city. That night, a German sniper tried again. A single shot cracked the silence, the bullet striking the stone inches from Anton's head. He didn't move. He waited, breathing slow. When the moonlight shifted, he saw the faint outline of a scope flash from the far building. He exhaled once and fired. The bullet split the darkness, and the echo faded into absolute quiet. By dawn, the city was calm again. The soldiers below told each other, the Ghost was watching, but Anton didn't feel victorious. He only felt colder. His legend now protected others, but it also trapped him inside it. A man hidden behind his own myth. And deep down, he knew the truth. The more invisible he became, the less of himself was left. The ghost had a reputation, but Anton Kovalenko, the man, was disappearing. They called him Der Geist, the ghost. At first, the German officers dismissed the rumors. A single Soviet marksman capable of killing from impossible distances? A man who appeared in one sector, then vanished before anyone could counter him? It sounded like battlefield superstition, something soldiers invented to explain failure. But soon the reports piled up. 3 officers dead within a week. 2 machine gun crews silenced in the span of minutes. Each body with 1 clean bullet wound, straight through the visor or the throat. No trace of where the shot came from.
No shell Kazinks, no Trax, no Flash.
By the spring of 1944, even the hardened Wehrmacht veterans whispered the same words when dawn broke. Der Geist is out there. In the ruins of Kovel, a sniper detachment of the 5th German Army was tasked with finding him. They studied maps, terrain angles, and wind patterns. They even brought in Oberfeldwebel Karl Vogel's successor, a sniper named Heinrich Bauer, once trained under the same deadly precision as Vogel himself. Bauer was a man of numbers. He didn't believe in ghosts. To him, every story had a calculation behind it: range, angle, temperature, and pressure. If a man was hitting his targets with such precision, it meant he understood mathematics, not magic. Still, even Bauer couldn't ignore the fear in the trenches. Men refused to lift their heads above the parapet. Runners crossed the streets in short bursts, counting seconds under their breath. Even radio operators spoke in whispers, as if sound alone could draw a bullet. Bauer decided to see it himself. On April 12th, under a pale gray sky, he and 2 spotters climbed into a bombed-out factory at the edge of the river. They set up their rifles facing the Soviet lines, each window covered with a torn cloth to break the reflection. The air smelled of brick dust and gun oil. For hours, nothing moved. Then a shape. A Soviet soldier walked slowly across an open courtyard, carrying what looked like a bucket of water. Bauer adjusted his scope. The distance, 480 meters. Wind speed, light, from the west. Easy shot. He steadied his breath, finger on the trigger, and then the soldier fell before Bauer even fired. Puff of red mist. No sound, just sudden stillness.
Bauer Frotze.
His spotters looked at him, confused. Did you shoot? He shook his head.
No.
They realized what that meant. The ghost was watching them. Bauer's instincts screamed to duck, but pride kept him upright. He peered through the scope again, scanning the far buildings, the bell tower, the rooftops. Nothing. Not a flicker. Then he noticed it. A shattered brick, freshly hit, just meters from his position. The bullet hadn't been meant to kill. It had been a warning. A message. I see you. For the first time in his life, Bauer felt small. He pulled back from the window, breathing hard, heart racing in his chest. That night, in his field journal, he wrote, "This enemy is not human. He studies us as if we are the experiment. He waits until we forget fear, then reminds us." Over the next days, the German snipers grew paranoid. They began firing at shadows, wasting ammunition on ghosts that weren't there. One man shot his own reflection in a broken mirror. Another refused to leave the dugout at all. The officers tried to restore order, but discipline couldn't erase the unease. Even the sound of a clicking bolt made men flinch. Anton's legend, the ghost, had become more powerful than any single rifle. He didn't even need to kill anymore. The fear itself did the work. Weeks later, Bauer requested reassignment to another sector. His official report read, "Enemy sniper of exceptional ability. possibly multiple individuals using coordinated deception. Psychological effect severe. Unofficially, he told his men, "You cannot fight what you cannot see." And so the Germans pulled back from the sector, leaving the ruins and the silence behind. When Soviet scouts advanced the next morning, they found the factory abandoned. Anton climbed to the same window Bauer had used, looked through his cracked scope, and saw nothing but empty snow. He smiled faintly, not from pride, but from exhaustion. He had become a weapon so feared that even the enemy's courage had frozen. But as he lowered his rifle, he whispered to himself, "They don't fear me. They fear what this war turns us into." And somewhere beyond the smoke, another sniper, another man just like him, was probably whispering the same words. Because in war, every ghost sees through someone else's eyes. By the summer of 1944, Anton Kovalenko was no longer just a man. He was a story, whispered, repeated, and reshaped until no one remembered where it began. Even his own comrades rarely used his name anymore. They simply said, "The ghost is out there." First, Anton tried to correct them. He told them he was a mechanic, not a soldier, not a hero. But words meant little in a world where survival had become legend. The front was moving west now. Villages burned, cities crumbled, and the lines between soldiers and civilians blurred into gray. Anton moved with the Third Army, covering their advance one shot at a time. He no longer fought for orders or revenge. He fought because that was all he knew how to do. Every night he cleaned his rifle by the fire, hands steady, movements mechanical. The others would talk about home, about food, about dreams. Anton stayed silent. His eyes were fixed on the weapon, as if it were the only thing still real. One evening, a medic named Lydia sat beside him. She was one of the few who dared to speak to him directly. "You know," she said softly, "people think you're not human anymore." Anton looked up, his face half-shadowed by the firelight. "Maybe they're right," he said. "Maybe ghosts don't bleed." Lydia studied him for a moment. "But you do. I've seen it. You're still alive." Anton smiled faintly. Alive doesn't mean living. After she left, he took out his old notebook, the one with engine sketches and small notes from before the war. Most of the pages were torn, but one line stood out, written months earlier. "When men stop feeling fear, they stop being men." He read it over and over, realizing he hadn't felt fear in a long time. Not since the duel. Not since he became the ghost. The next day, his unit reached a destroyed rail yard. A sniper duel erupted again. Distant, careful, endless. Anton lay in the rubble for 2 full days, neither eating nor sleeping, waiting for the perfect angle. When he finally fired, it was instinct, not thought. The German never even saw it coming. Afterward, Anton didn't feel triumph, only emptiness. The kill count no longer mattered. Every trigger pull just pushed him further from who he once was. That night, he stood by the ruins, watching the smoke drift upward into a starless sky. He tried to remember his home, the workshop, the smell of oil and steel, his mother's voice calling from the garden. But the memories were fading, replaced by the silence of the battlefield. He realized then that the ghost had stolen something from him, not just his fear, but his identity. The legend had devoured the man. In the weeks that followed, soldiers began inventing new stories. They said the ghost could hit a target through the eye of a moving bird, that he could shoot by sound alone, that bullets curved away from him as if afraid. Anton stopped denying it. He let the stories grow, because the more the myth spread, the less anyone asked about the man behind it. It was easier that way. But one morning, while resting near a burned-out tank, he found a cracked mirror half buried in the mud. He picked it up and looked at his reflection. The dirt, the hollow eyes, the cracked lens over one side. For a long moment, he didn't recognize himself. He whispered, almost to the mirror, "Who are you?" The man staring back said nothing. Only the cold wind answered. That night, Anton refused to take a position. He sat alone, watching the horizon burn red with artillery fire. The sound of distant gunfire no longer stirred adrenaline, only exhaustion. Lydia found him there, silent, staring into nothing. "You should rest," she said gently. Anton nodded. Soon. The war's almost over. But even he didn't believe it. When dawn came, he was gone. No footprints, no sound, just an empty spot where he had been. The men said he'd moved ahead to scout. Others said he'd finally vanished, like a spirit released. No one ever saw him again. Some claim he died that week, somewhere beyond the river, rifle still in hand. Others swear he lived, wandering the countryside for years, fixing broken machines and refusing to talk about the war. But among soldiers, his legend remained. They still spoke of the ghost, the man who blurred the line between myth and reality, between duty and survival. And somewhere, maybe Anton Kovalenko still listened, not as a hero, not as a monster, but as a man who once believed he could stay human in a world that no longer allowed it. The war ended not with a final shot, but with silence. A silence so deep that even the wind seemed afraid to move. In May 1945, the world began to rebuild itself from ashes. Soldiers went home, those who still had homes to return to. Cities woke like wounded giants. Children played again in streets that had once echoed with tanks. But some men did not come back. Some had given too much of themselves to the war to find their way home again. Anton Kovalenko was one of them. Officially, there was no record of his death, nor of his survival. His name appeared in no victory lists, no medals, no memorial stones. To the army, he was a ghost in every sense of the word. Yet the stories remained. Farmers in the western valleys spoke of a quiet man who repaired broken tractors and old radios, who never stayed long, who carried a rifle wrapped in cloth though he never used it again. They said he lived alone in a small cabin deep in the forest, where the birds were his only company and the sound of distant thunder still made him flinch. Some believed it was him, the ghost of Koval, the sniper who never missed. Others said it was just another veteran, lost and wandering. But those who met him swore there was something in his eyes, a weight, a distance, as if he were still staring through a scope that no longer existed. Years passed. The war became history, then memory, then myth. Children learned names like Stalingrad, Kursk, Normandy. But no one remembered Anton Kovalenko. Only a few of the oldest soldiers, sitting in quiet bars decades later, would sometimes lower their voices and say, "There was a man, a mechanic who became a ghost." They spoke of his calmness, his silence, the way he could wait for hours without moving. They said he saved dozens of lives, though he never counted. And when someone asked if the story was true, the veterans always said the same thing. True enough to be remembered. One bitter winter night, long after the world had forgotten his name, a hunter passing through the old front lines found a ruined cabin. Inside, he discovered a rifle propped against the wall, perfectly clean, a cracked scope still attached. Next to it lay a small notebook, its pages yellowed with time. Most of the words were faded, but one final sentence could still be read. If a man spends long enough staring through glass, he stops seeing life and starts seeing ghosts. No body was found. No grave was marked. Only the rifle remained, untouched by rust, as if still waiting for its owner to return. In the decades that followed, historians searched the archives. They found scattered mentions, field reports about a sniper who appeared and vanished, unexplained kills in sectors that had no recorded units. But there was never proof, only fragments. And yet, even without proof, the myth endured. War museums displayed rifles like his, claiming to tell the legend of the ghost. Filmmakers used his story to create heroes, and soldiers still whispered his name before battle, as if invoking luck. But those who had seen the real war, the mud, the cold, the silence, they knew the truth. There were no heroes, only survivors, and sometimes survival itself came at the cost of one's soul. Somewhere, deep in the forests of Eastern Europe, the wind still moves gently through the pines, carrying echoes of gunfire long gone. And when the night is still enough, when the fog rolls low across the old battlefield, a faint metallic click can sometimes be heard, like a bolt being drawn, steady and deliberate. They say it's nothing, just the forest shifting, the past breathing. But those who know the story pause, listen, and whisper quietly, "The ghost is still watching."